My life took an unexpected turn when my husband walked in on me in a compromising situation with another man. The aftermath of that moment was nothing short of catastrophic. His immediate reaction led to a 5-year jail sentence, my family's disdain, and my overwhelming self-loathing for shattering the image of our seemingly perfect family. I often find myself lost in thoughts of regret, repeating the same self-condemning mantra late into the night, especially when the silence in my once happy home becomes too loud to bear. My children, who were once the center of our universe, are no longer here. My ex-husband despises me with every right to do so, and my immediate family is torn apart. I never managed to forgive myself for the selfish act I committed back in 2015, right after turning 39. I now confess that I took my ex-husband for granted. He had always shown me love, complimenting my beauty daily and seeking intimacy regularly. He treated me as an equal, not a queen or princess, for we were partners in the truest sense. Our journey started in high school, and we remained each other's sole and steadfast companion. Everything felt just right. My family adored him, and my brother looked up to him as a role model. He had helped countless people in difficult situations, always the one they called when in trouble. Through the years, he proved himself to be a good man. We were blessed with 2 strong-willed sons, who, at the time of this incident, had grown into 2 wonderful young women. But over time, I let myself go, feeling self-conscious about my weight. He continued to tell me I was beautiful, even as we encountered few arguments that were usually about our physical relationship, or rather, the lack thereof on my part. It wasn't that I didn't want to connect with him in that way, but my mood often just didn't align. He understood, and we communicated openly about our desires. However, when I turned 39, my birthday party revealed a new version of myself. I had spent an entire year at the gym, practicing yoga and Pilates, and had managed to transform my body from 180 to 135 pounds. It was a remarkable achievement, especially for someone who had always been a bit heavier. My ex-husband also began his fitness journey, shedding pounds and tumming his body, going from 260 to 225. His desire for me only intensified, and he couldn't keep his hands off me. We went on dates, danced, and took regular walks. He continued to be a supportive partner around the house, and his eyes always conveyed his love and longing for me. It was incredible to think that even after 2 decades together, he still looked at me with such desire, something any woman would cherish. But despite all this, for reasons I couldn't explain, I still found myself unable to reciprocate his affection during that time. I initially attributed my decreased sexual desire to early menopause. Our physical intimacy had dwindled to about 3 times a month, and I was usually a one-and-done kind of person. In contrast, my husband's desire for more was unrelenting. He even suggested couple counseling as a solution, but I stubbornly declined, allowing my selfishness to cloud my judgment. The turning point arrived when a new manager joined my office a few days after my birthday. He was a bit younger and undeniably handsome, and for some inexplicable reason, he developed an interest in me. I initially brushed off his advances, but as time passed, my indifference transformed into casual conversation. Eventually, he started flirting, and I revealed my wedding ring. Yet, after 2 months of constant flirting, I found myself reciprocating, sharing details of my life with him, and, to my dismay, thinking about him more and more. In hindsight, I realized it was the beginning of an emotional affair, but at the time, I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. My husband began to sense that something was amiss. We had a heated argument about it, which, in my mind, began when he tried to kiss me. I unintentionally made a disgusted face, not directed at him, but rather at the thoughts of this other man who occupied my mind. A week after that incident, I decided to meet the new manager at a cafe with the intention of telling him to stay away, that I couldn't continue this. However, before I could utter a word, he kissed me, and my thoughts went blank. That marked the commencement of our 6-month affair. During this time, I found myself doing things with this man that my ex-husband had longed for. I was more eager, more willing, and constantly in the mood. It felt like a new and exciting experience, and as a result, My intimacy with my husband suffered. Although we did have occasional encounters, my behavior toward him grew increasingly critical and belittling, and I'm filled with shame when I reflect on how I treated him during that period. It wasn't until my brother came to visit and revealed that my ex-husband had confided in him about his deepening depression and thoughts of separation that I snapped out of it. He believed that I no longer loved him and that he was falling out of love with me. This revelation jolted me back to reality. I immediately ended the affair, resigned from my job, and resolved to make my husband feel loved and wanted again. I had resolved to fix my marriage, to become a better wife, but the universe had other plans. One day, my affair partner unexpectedly showed up at my house, carrying a box of office belongings I had requested. We spoke briefly. He sought answers, questioning what he had done wrong. I told him I needed to mend my marriage and asked him to leave. However, he pleaded for one last encounter, and foolishly, I agreed. We retreated to the guest room, where our liaison took a tragic turn. I lost track of time in the heat of the moment. Suddenly, my affair partner jerked back violently, and there was a deafening bang. As I sat up, I saw my ex-husband standing there, his eyes bloodshot, tears streaming down his face, lips trembling with pain. My affair partner lay on the floor, and there was a gaping hole in the wall. In the chaos that ensued, my ex-husband and affair partner clashed violently. I screamed, trying to intervene, but desperation led me to jump on my ex's back, resulting in me being thrown to the floor. Everything blurred for a moment. When I regained clarity, my ex-husband had my affair partner pinned down, and he was on the phone, his face a mask of determination. Moments later, the police arrived, handcuffing my ex-husband, while paramedics tended to my severely injured affair partner, who needed reconstructive surgery on his face. At the hospital, I faced a barrage of emotions from my family, my father's silent, shaming gaze, my brother's furious accusations, and my mother's misguided attempts at comfort, which only fueled my father's anger. My affair partner's wife also confronted me, revealing a truth I had been oblivious to. He was married. This revelation added another layer of guilt and remorse. In the aftermath, my boys stayed with their grandparents, refusing to talk to me. My daughters were equally distant. My ex-husband, too wounded to see me, refused my attempts to visit him in jail. Despite my brother's efforts, he ensured my ex was transferred to a correctional facility, where he would serve his sentence, a stark reminder of the irreversible consequences of my actions. To keep an eye on my ex-husband during the trial, I asked my brother if he could relay a message for me. His response was bitter, telling me to go to hell. The trial marked the first time in 3 months that I saw him, and the anger in his eyes cut deeper than anything I had ever experienced. Even in our angriest moments, he used to look at me with love, but during the trial, it was pure hatred. Overwhelmed by the emotions, I excused myself to the restroom to cry. As the trial days passed, I was forced to recount my affair in agonizing detail for everyone in the courtroom to hear. When I mentioned the duration of the affair, my ex-husband looked utterly crushed, and my father stood up and walked out in disgust. During his testimony, I learned that he had come home to surprise me with lunch and a romantic weekend trip for 2 in the Catskills. He had meticulously planned a romantic getaway, only to walk in on us, and his reaction was visceral. He later explained that, upon seeing us together, the affair partner ordered him to step aside, and my ex-husband snapped. He violently beat the affair partner, only stopping when he tossed me away. My ex-husband quickly called 911, and the courtroom played the recording of his voice, filled with pain and sobs, as he followed the operator's instructions. It was a heart-wrenching moment. The affair partner couldn't verbally testify and was heavily medicated, so they displayed images of his injuries, which made me physically ill. I felt responsible for this man's severe injuries, as my ex-husband had smashed his eye socket, cheekbones, and destroyed his jaw to the point where the bone fragments were too small to reconstruct. My ex-husband was subsequently charged with a 3rd-degree felony and sentenced to 7 years. This decision led to protests from my sons and anguished cries from my daughters and his family, a sound that still haunts me. The first 3 months that followed were torturous. I was sued by my affair partner's wife for alienation of affection, and my ex-husband filed for divorce. My eldest son moved out, while the other son withdrew into his room, and my twins rebelled fiercely. My former sister-in-laws physically attacked me in a store, and my ex-husband's mother spat in my face when I tried to apologize to her. My father and brother refused to speak to me, and even my lifelong friends were divided over the situation. I eventually had to find a new job since there was no money coming in, and I had almost depleted our savings. I was essentially blacklisted in my field due to the negative publicity surrounding the trial, so I resorted to working in retail and took on a seasonal position as an H&R Block adjuster during the tax rush. I came perilously close to losing our home, and my ex-husband refused to allow me to visit him. Every letter I sent was returned unopened, and crying in the shower became almost a daily ritual. My parents' marriage was strained as my mother persistently defended me, while my brother continued to ignore my existence. It was a bleak time, and even my lifelong friendships began to crumble. Dark thoughts of ending everything began to creep into my mind, contemplating a way out of the unbearable pain. I carried the weight of guilt on my shoulders, watching my belongings disappear as I drifted into isolation. The burden became too much to bear, eventually leading me to seek help from a therapist. She didn't mince words. She scolded me, telling me that I had grown complacent in my relationship with my ex-husband. I hadn't seen him as a husband, but more like a friend with benefits, and I had treated him as such. She was right. I had taken him for granted. Nearly a year had passed, a year of silence from my children. When I cooked dinner, they would quietly collect their food and retreat to their rooms, refusing to even glance in my direction. I had my share of meltdowns, begging them to speak to me, but it was met with silence. My brother got married, and I wasn't invited, though my kids were. I continued trying to visit my ex-husband, hoping he would add me to the visitor list, but I was consistently denied access. My letters remained unanswered, plunging me further into depression. Then, out of the blue, my brother showed up at my house. It was the first time he had visited since the trial, and he was clearly unhappy. He came to scold me, emphasizing that my ex was in the infirmary after a violent incident. An inmate had attempted to sexually assault him in his cell, resulting in my ex-husband getting stabbed in the stomach and the inmate suffering a broken spine. My brother's words cut deep, and I cried for days, acknowledging that in many ways, I was responsible for this outcome. I made persistent efforts to visit my ex in the infirmary and continued writing letters, but they were consistently returned. For 4 more years, I tried to reach out to him, with no success. Thankfully, our children visited their father frequently, and it was through them that I learned he had been placed in protective custody by my brother after the attack. Over the years, my eldest attended the same college as my ex-husband and pursued the same major, but he only maintained contact with his siblings. He had no desire to speak to me or visit our house during the holidays, choosing instead to spend time with his grandparents. My other son followed a similar path, going to the same college and refusing to contact me. As for my twins, they were hard on me, but their visits to their father improved their mood. Whenever they became excessively rebellious, their uncles stepped in to set them straight. My brother and I still hardly spoke, despite my attempts to reach out. I even tried to visit his wife when they had their first child, but I was asked to leave. My mother continued to keep me informed about the happenings in their lives, while my father maintained his refusal to acknowledge me. Then, at the beginning of May this year, my children returned home, seemingly happy, a rare sight that brought a glimmer of hope. I didn't understand why, and at that point, I didn't even care. My children were back home for 4 months, and I did everything in my power to show them how sorry I was. Although I was mostly ignored, they were talking to me, and those conversations brought immense joy. Finally, I was able to know what was happening in their lives. My eldest had been dating a woman for over a year. My second-born was excelling on a college track team, and even my girls were starting to talk to me again. Witnessing their smiles, hearing their laughter, and sharing meals together felt like a cherished dream I never thought I'd experience again. I missed those moments deeply. Towards the end of August, I was eagerly preparing for the twins' first day of their senior year, which also happened to be their 18th birthday. I enthusiastically shared my excitement about their upcoming birthday party, telling them all the plans I had in mind. But without hesitation, my girls asked if we could celebrate it on a different day. I was confused. I thought we were making progress. When I asked why, one of them bluntly said, "Because Dad is throwing us a party, and I don't want you near him." Her words stunned me. I inquired when their father was released, and they informed me that he had been out since the end of April due to good behavior. The news shattered me. He was back in their lives, and they seemed happier because of it. It wasn't our healing they were enjoying. It was having him back. I asked where he was staying, and they revealed he was living with my brother. Driven by desperation, I tried reaching out. I attempted to call him, went to his place holding all the letters he had returned throughout the years, and glimpsed him briefly through the door crack. I cried out his name, but my brother promptly asked me to leave. I handed him the letters and departed. As I reached the driveway, I heard his voice and turned around, only to be met with his cold rejection. He handed back my letters, emphasizing, "You forgot this." My pleas fell on deaf ears as he walked away. My children, witnessing the scene, stared at me, their eyes void of love. In that moment, I realized that my children were merely tolerating me. Despite the overwhelming odds, I still clung to a sliver of hope. I wanted to fix this, to tell him how profoundly sorry I was for my selfishness, for destroying what we once had. I longed for the chance to express how much I missed him, how deeply I regretted my actions. I yearned for him to forgive me, to talk to me, to be by my side again. I wanted our family reunited, but deep down, I knew I didn't deserve it. Even if, by some miracle, we were reunited, it could never be the same. My selfishness had irreparably altered everything, and I wished I could turn back time and undo the damage I had caused. Now let's delve into the opinions from the community. Opinion number 1 expressed deep sympathy for your ex-husband, highlighting how your own account revealed emotional abuse and dismissive behavior toward a man who always made you feel loved and desired. This person emphasized the importance of surrounding yourself with friends who hold you accountable for your actions, rather than those who condone your behavior. They advise you to work on yourself and seek therapy to move forward. Opinion number 2 offered a stark perspective, suggesting that it might be best for you to stop trying to reconnect with your past family, as your attempts could be perceived as harassment. The advice was to acknowledge the irreparable damage and respect the boundaries set by your ex-husband and children. Opinion number 3 emphasized the gravity of the situation, pointing out that your children cut ties with you due to the severity of the events. They stressed the need to respect your ex-husband's choice to distance himself and advised you to focus on moving forward, improving your relationship with your children, and being realistic about the future. This opinion emphasized the importance of accepting the situation rather than holding on to unrealistic dreams. As for the viewers, they were encouraged to share their thoughts, subscribe, and like the video to support the channel. The overall sentiment expressed was one of understanding the tragedy of your situation, but urging you to accept the reality and move forward for the sake of your own well-being.